Start your week with a triple shot of good vibes. This is the Project Joy Podcast. I'm your host, Jessica Dugas. Thanks for joining me. And now it's time for this week's story of joy. Well, you may have noticed, or maybe not, but you may have noticed that this particular podcast was not out last week. We're supposed to be out every Monday morning, every single week, like clockwork. And I have to tell you how exhausted I was when it came to doing the show last week. I recently moved, as I shared in one of my recent podcasts. It was very, very sudden. We knew that we would be moving eventually, but we didn't anticipate where we moved to, nor the speed at which we had to do it. So it threw me for a loop. And honestly, things have been going really well, like just in the move in general, and feeling okay during the move. And, doing it during a full moon is something that I won't do it again. But, it was a fun time. But, all in all, I've been doing really well with everything, and my children and my husband have been doing really well with the move in general. However, when it came to prioritizing, and this is something that I've talked about so many times in my communities with my coaching clients on the Breakthrough Show, that we do things not necessarily on, when we do something, it's a priority level thing. And as much as I, of course, want to get this show out every single week, I also know my boundaries, my limits at this point and in my life. And I want to share the joy from that today, because this is something that, believe it or not, has been a long time coming. In the past, I would have gone to put out the show, and regardless of, could I have done it? Absolutely. Could I have gotten it out last week? Absolutely. I could have gotten it done, and it would have added one more thing to my list in addition to moving, and I would have been exhausted. I don't think that the show would have been a quality show. I think it would have been from a place of complete exhaustion. And so whether or not I can do it is one thing, but in the past I would have pushed through and I would have done it anyway. And there are instances, I think, when that's a really good thing, but the awesome thing for me and my real joy in this last week was allowing myself to say, the show is going to be great if you put it out next week, and give yourself the permission and the forgiveness and the leeway to allow yourself to push it a week, because you are the boss of you. You are the boss of this show. You're the boss of the Project Joy podcast. And it might seem like, look, this is such a silly thing. Of course you are, but I would have allowed the fear of what other people were going to think. I would have allowed the fear of imperfection. I would have allowed the fear of inconsistency. I would have allowed all of these fears to creep in before, and then put out something that isn't my best work. And so we're back this week. You get a double feature. You get, both episodes in a row, episodes 18 and 19 in a row today on Friday, I don't even know what day it is, on Monday, May 11th. And I get to share with you the fact that I've had this realization, and it's brought me so much joy. We'll be back in just a minute for more of the Project Joy podcast. The truth is, I never thought being on a journey of self-improvement would be lonely. I thought, I'm going to work on myself personally, get in touch with what spirituality and faith truly means to me, and allow these tweaks and changes to make me a better person and spill over into my work, and the world will be a better place. The end. I didn't know how hard it would be when the majority of people around me just didn't understand what I was doing or why. I was really missing that support of other people who not only held the space for me to explore and grow on life's journey, but that were committed to making the world a better place through their own self-improvement as well. I've got the perfect space for you to do just that in my Soul Connection Collective. It's the safe space for you to learn and grow personally and spiritually while connecting with soulmate friends who can make your life easier, more fun, and hold you accountable on your journey. Join us today by visiting jessicadugas.com and clicking Soul Connection Collective, or just click the link in our show notes. And now back to the podcast. Welcome back to the Project Joy podcast. I'm your host, Jessica Dugas, and we are talking about joy in physical touch today for our episode 18, which, as I mentioned in Story of Joy, should have come out to you on May 4th, but here we are on May 11th. You get a double feature, a back-to-back of Project Joy podcast today. And, maybe it'll bring you double the joy. We'll see. But as I mentioned in episode 17, or at the end of episode 17, in talking about what this week would be about, or this episode would be about, the joy in physical touch, is that this is a really interesting time for this topic to come up. So let me just share with you, I think I may have mentioned it in the very beginning of the creation of this podcast, that when I decided to do this show, it was truly like a divine download. I knew I was supposed to do it. And in 10 minutes time, I wrote down all 51 episodes of the, Project Joy podcast in like 5 minutes. And it was something that was really cool to me because I have tended, as time has gone on, as I've had different shows and things like that, to waffle on about what I'm going to talk about, or what the topic's going to be, or who's going to be on the show. And this one, like, I just knew the flow. I knew what I wanted it to be, and I wrote it down. So that's neither here nor there, but it's interesting because here we are going through, at the time of this podcast, we're finally starting to come out of what has been known as a global pandemic with COVID-19. And a lot of people have been inside and separated from each other. And we're talking about today joy in physical touch. Now, I love that this has actually happened with the Breakthrough Show so often before, that something has happened ahead of time or something was planned ahead of time, and then it comes to be perfect timing for when the episode comes out. So I just love that the same thing is happening here on Project Joy Podcast. So I recently looked at an article on healthline.com, and there is an article that talks about touch starvation. And this is something that they say humans are wired to be touched. From birth until the day we die, our need for physical contact remains. Being touch starved, also known as skin hunger or touch deprivation, occurs when a person experiences little to no touch from other living things. And it says, wait, is this a real thing? It's absolutely a real thing. And there are lots of different kinds of touch, right? Like, there's obviously, when we think about relationships or what have you, there's sensual touch, there's touch that happens in the bedroom, but there's also, I think sometimes we forget about all the other ways that we physically touch other people. So we talk about holding hands. We talk about, a pat on the back. a handshake to someone you meet or someone at work. So many different things. If you have children, you might be brushing their hair or braiding their hair or helping to give them a bath or something along that line. And it's really something that I think many people may have taken for granted until recently when we were told 6 feet apart. And there's been a lot of really funny memes going around about being introverts and extroverts during this time, and about how, the extroverts are going crazy and the introverts are finally like, yes, this is my kind of life. But even being introverted, that need for physical touch is still there. And again, a lot of times we think of it as in a way of it being a sensual or a sexual thing, but we're forgetting about all of those other quote unquote small acts of physical touch and the importance of them in our lives. I have been one of the ones that during this pandemic, during this time, I've said, listen, my life has not really changed a whole lot. I work at home. I work online. I do a lot of my socializing online because my social circle is pretty much non-existent where I live, for a lot of different reasons. And if you want to dig into why, you can go listen to many, I've done one of our shows here about it, a little bit about it, about my time here in Alabama. And I've mentioned it in other Breakthrough, on my other show, The Breakthrough, as well. But, we also homeschool. So all of the things that we do on a day-to-day really hasn't changed. I mean, the only thing that's been a little bit different is, my husband being a little bit more diligent about, disinfecting and things like that, because he still works very much in a public manner and then comes home every night. So things haven't changed much for us, but I've seen some people's posts on Facebook about the global, pandemic. And one in particular said that this whole thing of working online and schooling online and all of that, it is not normal. Well, it is normal for us. But I think the reason in our house that we're not, starving for that physical touch or for that human interaction is because we do have such a large family. There are 8 of us in our house. We have 6 children, and then we have my husband and I. And so it's a situation of it is normal for us, and it's not something that we have as a concern because there are so many of us, and because I try to remember to hug the kids, and to, like I said, with the babies, we help with baths and we brush hair, and all of that physical touch is there. I pat them on the back, the older ones on the back, or give them a hug when they've helped with dinner or something of that manner. And so I think that finding joy in physical touch is something that we just need to be more aware of, that we need it, that it does bring us joy, and how can we welcome more of that in our lives. Now, I will link to this article from Healthline in the show notes, because there are lots of different things just about the hormones that physical touch produces and why we need it. The actual science of all of this, and a scientist I am not, but the science of all of it is in this article, and I would highly encourage you to look at it, because I think it can give us so much understanding as to why we need it and how we can appreciate it a little more. I think that, like I said, a lot of these aspects of physical touch, we don't realize how often we do it, or that we do need it, until it's taken away from us, or until, we just don't realize that it's not there. Or when we do have the physical touch, we go, oh, that was missing, from my life, kind of thing. And so look over the article and I think realize that we do need that physical touch there, and ask yourself, have I taken physical touch for granted in my life before? And how can I find more joy in that physical touch today? We'll be right back in a minute with more of the Project Joy podcast. If you love the Project Joy podcast, you'll love my weekly talk show, The Breakthrough Show. It's the talk show for spiritual and personal development, changing how you look at and live your life. We've got incredible topics, guests, and entertainers that will inspire you to live your best life. Join us every Friday morning at 9 a.m. Central Time. Find out more information and tune in every Friday by visiting us at thebreakthroughshow.com or by finding the link in our show notes. And now back to the podcast. On the next episode of the Project Joy podcast, we'll be talking about joy in the feminine. What is feminine energy? What does it entail? Can we find the joy there and experience more of the feminine in our lives? And this is something, is it important to men and women, or is it something that women should just pay attention to? We'll dive into a little bit of that on the next episode. Thanks so much for listening today, guys. Please take a moment to rate, subscribe, comment, and share where available. And until next week, make joy a priority in your life today and every day. We'll see you next time. You've been listening to the Project Joy podcast with your host, Jessica Dugas. We'll see you again next Monday and every Monday for another episode to start your week off right.